Welcome back to our masterclass on dating traps. Last time we talked a little bit about a model that I want us to follow as we go through these traps. If you remember, we suggested that there's a health check that we've got to make. Then we suggested there's a heritage check, then a maturity check, and lastly, a mission check. What I'm suggesting then is that as you go through this class, there are going to be 4 quadrants that I would love you to process. 4 quadrants that I'd love you to talk to your friends about. 4 quadrants that I'd love you to have a discussion around with yourself, reflectively, and with others. It's vital. Last time we talked, we suggested that you must make sure that you are healthy yourself so that you can attract someone healthy. We suggested that there are about 8 principles, 8 character traits that you should have if you're a believer that's in a healthy direction running toward God. I don't need perfection. I just need you to be moving in a particular direction toward these 8. And so today I want to talk a little bit about the second quadrant, which is the heritage check. If you want to know who somebody will be in the future, oftentimes you can look back at who they were in the past. Another way of saying it is, the best indicator of future behavior is to go back in the past and look at what were the habits, the tendencies, and the decision-making processes that that person went through. In other words, if somebody comes from a family that's been divorced, you've got to make sure they have processed that well, or else divorce will be a little easier for them as they go into a relationship with you. That is why somebody's heritage is so very important. It's vital. And so I want to talk a little bit and show you a model for how to process this particular quadrant. It's called the heritage quadrant. Let me explain to you. The way God works it out, Psalm 127, he says that children are like an arrow that should be pointed in the direction that they ought to go and then released into it. An arrow has 3 components. It has the arrowhead, then it has the shaft, then it has this last section called fletching. The fletching component has 4 feathers, and its job is to stabilize the arrow as it goes toward its intended destination. That's a massive deal. When an arrow does not have fletching, in other words, the feathers are missing, then it goes wobbling all the way through the air, and it will not get to its intended destination. Fellas, if you like football, that is the reason why the football is thrown and it spirals through the ear to make sure that it gets to its intended destination. The purpose of these feathers are to make sure that it stays straight and stabilizes so it gets to its destination. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, that means when the feathers are not present, then it is wobbling through the ear. So you must discern what feathers are missing, and is the person aware of those feathers as they go through life. So I'm going to give you the 4 feathers that the Bible suggests that every human being should have. And the first thing I want you to do is to reflect and ask the question, do you have all 4 feathers intact? If you don't, then you need to ask yourself, how do I begin the process of making sure the feathers that I need are intact? That is why this is so very important. The feathers, then, let's talk about them momentarily. It's in your notes that you can get. It's called the 4 purposes of the family, right? And so the first one is the sanctuary. That's the first feather. The second one is the purpose is a school. The third one is a scouting agency. And the fourth one is a service provider. All 4 are vital to the health of this arrow, which means they're all vital to your health as well. So before you start looking at somebody else, you must examine yourself first. So what are the traps then? The trap that you can fall into is that you will ignore the fletching and of the person that you're interested in dating, and you can ignore them and just hope that it works out. Or you can ask yourself, well, let's examine each one of these to see how this individual is doing. So remember, the quadrant is the heritage check. We're looking at where they're coming from, the background they're coming out of, and whether or not they have done the work to become healthy so that they do not carry generational curses from one generation to the next. Because when you marry this person, you're marrying them for life. So whatever the baggage they brought in is the baggage that you're going to inherit and have to process together. That is why this is so important. So let's talk about each of these four. The first one is the sanctuary. The sanctuary is designed to make sure that you are becoming who God has called you to become. It's to teach you and to make sure you know how to handle three things: change, failure, and rejection. The home is supposed to be a sanctuary. It's supposed to be a shelter in the storm. So what should have happened in the home for you and for your potential mate is they should have seen how to handle failure. They should have seen how to handle change, and they should have observed how to handle rejection. When the home is a sanctuary, when you go through painful situations, you're supposed to know that once you come home, this is a safe place from the storms of the world. Which means if your spouse does not know that, then when you come home, they won't create a safe place for you to share your thoughts, for you to process your feelings, and for you to deal with change, failure, and rejection. The issue is not highlighting how the family of origin that somebody came from. We're not trying to show them that, well, you're messed up or anything like that. We just want to know, have you processed what you saw growing up? Because whatever you saw modeled is what's now oftentimes in you. And what's in you is what you will reproduce. Therefore, as you process yourself, you must ask, how did my family interact with the issue of change? How did my family interact with failure? How did my family interact with rejection? And you must highlight that so that you are able to deal with it in your future. Let me give you a couple examples, then we'll move on to the next one. What that therefore means is, when it comes to failure, do you know how to handle that? When it comes to change, people coming in and out of your life, do you know how to handle when somebody comes in and when somebody comes out? I often tell my friends, there are three kinds of people when it comes to people coming in and out of your lives. Number one, you're looking at somebody who, this is so important, somebody who is for you, second person, somebody who is for what you're for, and third person, somebody who is for what you're against. That's a vitally important concept. Because if you don't know how to handle change, listen somebody, you will then misinterpret why God brought somebody into your life. If you have two or three people that are for you in your life, then you've got a lot. There are very few people that will be for you. There are very few people that when you're crying, they want to cry with you. That when you're going through the hardest times and when you've disappointed the whole world, they'll still be there with you. There are very few people like that. And then if you're not careful, you will tell your dreams, your aspirations, your goals, your secrets to people who are not for you, but for what you're for. And when you do that, they will walk out of your lives and they will hurt you in ways you never thought possible, and it will be painful. And you should have learned the difference between all three and the level of information you share with all three in your home. If you have not, then you will want to share your feelings and emotions and pain with anybody, which will result in you feeling excruciating pain. Well, if you invite somebody like that into your house, they will tell your stuff to people that are not for you, but people who are against what you're against, and you would have given them information that is not necessary for the level of commitment you have with them. That's one of the things when you're dealing with change based on the model we're talking about now. Rejection. How do you deal with rejection? When you're rejected, you didn't get the promotion you wanted to get. How do you deal with that? How does your spouse deal with that? Your potential spouse deal with that? Do they know how to deal with rejection? That's a critical one, because if they don't, they will go flying through the air because they don't have the stabilizing forces. So that's the sanctuary. What's the sanctuary's purpose? To protect you in the middle of the storm. Let's go to the second quadrant. The second one says your family of origin should have been a school that teaches you life lessons. That's what it should have been. Have you understood the basic life lessons that you should have learned when you were growing up in your teenage years? If you have not, then you're going to have to face it sometime in life. That is why the age of adolescence have been extended now all the way to 30, because kids are still being kids. The Bible says, when I was a child, I spoke like a child. I thought like a child. But when I became a man, when I became an adult, I put away childish things. If you grew up in a home where they allowed you to get away with things and you did not grow up and mature to who God was calling you to be, then you will be like a kid that still wants to play with toys when you have major responsibilities. That's vital. Let me give you the three areas that should have been discussed and thoroughly vetted while you were growing up. Number one, the area of relationship. Number two, the area of character. And number three, the area of values. Now remember what we're saying. These, if you don't check the heritage check, then you're going to fall into a trap of assuming that I'm good, I'm going to make it, it don't matter, God will work it out with us together, I don't need to evaluate their past. When one of these are missing, then that person is wobbling through the air. Now the issue is not that it's just missing. The issue is, are they aware that it's missing, and are they working hard with mentors, with reading, with getting new insight to develop this particular feather so that they can be a stabilizing force as they go through life? So the three areas: character, relationship, and values. What are the values of this person? What are their values? Are one of their values that they'll honor God and glorify God with all their lives? Well, be careful now, because if that's a value, then they wouldn't want to sleep with you before you get married. I know I just lost half of you right there, but that's okay. I'm still saying, if they are not honoring God before the marriage, then why do you think they'll honor God after the marriage? That's why values are so important. What do they value? If they value the fact that God should be glorified in their lives, then you should see it manifest itself in your relationship with them, in their relationship with their parents, in their relationship with their coworkers, in their relationships with you. You should see it, and you should see what they value. Don't let them tell you what their dream values are. Allow them and ask them to tell you what their real values are. And you know how you know what their real values are? They live it out every single day. They do what's most important to them every single day. The third one in this category you need to examine is this whole idea of character. Who they are when no one is looking. That is why, if you avoid this trap, it will be helpful for you, because you ought to look at, how do they treat the person, the waitress at the store? How do they treat the person who can do nothing for them? Are they only trying to live to impress people who can do something for them? Or do they care about all human beings and they're trying to do things to benefit them? Look at who they are when no one is looking. When no one is looking, look at how they treat you. Not during the first part of the relationship. They're trying to get you, so they're going to treat you well. But look at how they treat you when you don't do what they want to do. Look at how they treat you when you don't do something that honors God. Look at how they treat you then. Look at how they treat God when nobody's looking. Look at how they interact with God. Are they having regular time with God or not? It's a value which reflects a character, which is why that's important for you. If that's not there, let me play the movie forward. If that's not there, then they're not going to care. If they didn't care about sleeping with you before they got married, they're not going to care about sleeping with somebody else after they married to you. And you're going to say, but we were exclusive. Yeah, but if you were dishonoring God on the front side and you're now dishonoring God on the back side, then you cannot complain at that point because you weren't honoring God too on the front side, which means it's okay when they don't honor God on the back side. All right, so we've gone through those two. Let's go to the third one. The third one is the scouting agency. What's the scouting agency? That is where your parents and your family of origin should have helped you discover who you are and what God was calling you to do. That's where you know your shape. That's where you know your spiritual gifts, the heart that you have for God and the passion, the things that your heart beat for, your abilities, your personalities, and your experiences. Go to your notes and you will see them all there. That is where you're trying to discern what it is that God's uniquely calling you to do. We're going to deal with this one extensively in our last quadrant, so I'm not going to talk about that much here. But if you don't know what that is, then you'll be aimlessly going in a direction, which means you have no purpose, which means you have no clarity around where you're going, which then becomes extraordinarily dangerous. Okay? Let's go to the last one. That is the service provider. The service provider simply says, is this person willing to identify that the antidote to self-centeredness is other-centeredness? And that's what your parents should have taught you early. Let me explain a little further. The moment you get out of the womb, the first word you know is not mommy, it's not daddy, it's mine. Why? Because there's an innate desire to be self-centered. Everybody has. There's an innate desire to be, it's all about me. Every time somebody takes a picture, a group picture, you know what you look at first? You don't look at how the whole group looks. You want to know, how do you look in that particular picture? So if there are 20 people in there, you're zooming into, how do I look in this picture? That's because we have a natural proclivity to be self-centered. Well, the Bible teaches us, Mark 10:45, that God didn't come to be served, but to serve, to be other-centered, which is what you are called to do as well. So part of the family should have taught you how to be selfless in your orientation. Therefore, you ought to be observing. Is this person selfless? Is this person trying to be other-centered? Because if they're not, it means there's one of the feathers that are not intact. No problem if it's not intact. No problem if you didn't grow up with a family that taught you that. But are you in hot pursuit of now becoming that? And when you look at the person you're trying to date, is that normal for them? Or are they even aware that this is who they should be becoming? Because if they're not, I'm asking you to remember, then as they go through life, because the feathers are not intact, then they will not get to the destination. Ladies, then they cannot lead you to the destination. Then men, then if they're coming alongside you to accomplish what God has called you both to do, then they will hold you back and you won't thrive to the destination God has called in you to go to. What do I mean then? Having evaluated your heritage check, now you need to avoid the trap of not giving them a pass on their heritage, but blow it up. That's one of my best principles in life. Whenever you see and you're in a situation and it seems minuscule today, here's what I tell everybody: blow it up. Multiply it by 10. Can you live with that? So the trap is that you will skate through the heritage, not ask a lot of questions, not wrestle with and have conversations around this model, and because you don't, you would have given them a pass that will come back in your relationship, and it will come back to cause you pain. Hope this was helpful. Cannot wait to get to number 3. Let me give you a summary. First part of the quadrant, the health check. Second part of the quadrant, the heritage check. What we're going to talk about next time is the maturity check. Your emotionally, how are they doing? We're going to talk about spiritually, how are they doing? We're We're going to talk about relationally. How are they doing? Because you've got to do the maturity check. How do they handle their emotions? Are they emotionally mature? That's where we're heading to next. And then the last one will be the mission check. How are they living for God? I cannot wait to see you next time. Thanks for joining us. All right. How long was that?